Morning to CPSA's webinar on aged care. As you've probably already understood, we are having a few technical problems, but we'll work through that as the webinar progresses. Just some housekeeping matters. We are open to questions, but you can't ask them directly on screen. This would really throw us out. Please write your questions in comments, and we will answer them either during the webinar or we will contact you after the webinar. Okay, so straight into it. The Aged Care Royal Commission delivered its final report last week after an investigation of more than 2 years. The Commission was, in the words of the late Commissioner Richard Tracy, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to redesign the aged care system. CPSA gave evidence on 3 occasions to the Commission, starting in February 2019, and the Commission's interim report, Neglect, reported on many of the issues covered by CPSA's evidence during the Commission's first hearing. Even though it's sad that the aged care system is in such a bad way, CPSA did feel its advocacy over many years, for which it has been derided by industry, government, and even some advocacy organisations, was vindicated. In this webinar, we want to give our views on the final report and the future of aged care over the next few years. So straight to the point, is the report any good? Well, overwhelmingly, the recommendations are good, particularly on staffing of nursing homes and on the home care waiting lists. There are a few issues, obviously. The most observable thing was that the two commissioners disagreed on many things. When you go through the report, there will be a recommendation by Commissioner Bargoni and followed by a different recommendation by Commissioner Briggs. And that is disappointing, because from a report like this, which is the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to redesign the aged care system, you would expect a blueprint, and we now have basically two roadmaps, I guess, although the differences are not that great. The main difference is on what is called system governance. Now, system governance is the way the system is organized and regulated. So it is about whether the Department of Health, which was the main regulator of aged care until a few years ago, continues in its role. There is an Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission. Does it continue in its role? And this is where the first differences came up. The one commissioner, Commissioner Bargoni, said that the Department of Health should have no further involvement in the regulation and policy development for aged care. And he cited the deplorable state of aged care, which everyone agrees with, that is true. And he basically blamed the Department of Health for this deplorable state. And he said that the Department of Health is too beholden to its minister and too busy with other things besides aged care, which of course really came up during the COVID crisis, when the Department of Health managed the crisis but did not do much about particularly residential aged care. Commissioner Briggs felt that to go for a new commission, a new aged care commission, similar to what happened in the NDIS, would be too expensive to set up, and she wanted new arrangements in the Department of Health to improve things. But they agreed on quite a few things. Really, the issue is about independence of regulation and compliance monitoring. So the compliance monitoring is about the inspections of nursing homes and checking whether standards are met. And the main thing there is independence from government. And where Commissioner Pagoni wanted independence in one fell swoop, Commissioner Briggs wanted to do it by giving the existing Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission greater powers, and calling it an authority rather than a commission, and give it independence, which it currently doesn't have. So effectively, that turns down to a boiled down version of Mr. Pagoni's Aged Care Commission. Both commissioners wanted an independent pricing authority. There's that word again, independent. The difference there being that Pagoni wanted the authority to set prices. So just a decision by the authority and no further discussion. Whereas Commissioner Briggs wanted the authority to determine prices and recommend them so that government could make up its mind. And the argument that Commissioner Briggs offered was that the government would never want to lose control over how much it spends on aged care, which has got a huge budget. I think it was 20 billion for the government alone, and that is paying for a really bad system. So the cost can only go up. Both want an advisory council. Both want an inspector general of aged care. A little bit about the taxation inspector general to keep tabs on everyone. Also, both want a new independent standard setting body. That's also a very important thing. And you've heard the word independent used a few times, which means that both commissioners are agreed that there should be more independence in the way the system is run, and political expedience should be set aside. And if that can be achieved, then the Royal Commission would have earned its keep already. And the effect of both, it doesn't matter which. Well, it does matter, but if whichever option is implemented, a new Aged Care Commission or continuing with the Department of Health, the role of the Department of Health, and therefore the role of politicians, the role of government, would be reduced significantly. The question is, what do we make? What does CPSA make of these two options? Obviously, we would like to see independence established. We had our own system governance model. I won't go into it here because I don't want to introduce a third option and muddy the waters even further. System governance strategics are welcome to read our submissions online at our website, cpsa.org.au. But we would tend to Commissioner Pagoni's model of an independent aged care commission. We agree with Commissioner Pagoni that the Department of Health has been a very weak, ineffectual regulator and policy developer and certainly standard developer for aged care. And it's obvious that the NDIS, the disability insurance scheme, which has its own independent body to run it, is the way to go for aged care as well. I mean, a lot of the providers in the NDIS scheme are also aged care providers. So at an operational level, the system is already integrated. We just have to do it for the regulatory level as well, and perhaps a merger of NDIS, disability, and aged care regulatory functions and policy development functions is the way to go. Now, the media attention has been, for a long time, of course, been on staffing in nursing homes and also on the waiting list for home care packages. But before we get on to that, we want to talk about one very important recommendation, which is that the Aged Care Act 1997 should be replaced with something else. It's a very important recommendation, and it's one that the government has already adopted. Minister for Health, Greg Hunt, has said that work has already begun. And just as well, because it has to be finished by the 1st of July 2023. So that's not too far away when you look at the job of rewriting legislation for the aged care system. The concern, of course, is, and it's a justified concern, that this has the potential to delay very urgent action on increasing staffing in nursing homes, and also doing away with home care waiting lists. CPSA's view, though, is that it's very important to replace the old Aged Care Act 1997. This act was written by an aged care provider, or the first draft was written by an aged care provider at the time, and it is all to do with funding aged care, and the government input in that has been, in the words of the Act, that due regard would have to be had to the limited resources available to support services and the need to consider equity and merit in accessing those resources. In other words, as cheap as possible and as few people as possible in that system, so that we can keep the cost to the budget down. This is what the Aged Care Act 1997 is about. It is all about limiting supply of aged care and making sure that it falls short of demand. Now, you might say, that objective is not so evident in nursing homes. It's always possible to find a nursing home place if you need one, but the restrictions on supply really became evident in 2017. That's just a short 3-4 years ago. And it became apparent when the Department of Health started publishing the waiting list numbers for the home packages program. Currently, there are 100,000 people waiting. It has been as high as 125,000, or a little bit more even. So that really shows you that the old Aged Care Act allows this inadequate supply to continue. It enables neglect and with neglect, abuse. So the current aged care system works on an eligibility basis. You are eligible, but you might not get anything. So the new system must be on an entitlement basis, and the recommendation is for that. An entitlement basis means that you get care when or if and when you need it, and in the form that you need it. So this new act would enable that, and that is it's very pleasing to see. We at CPSA recommended to the Aged Care Commission that the Aged Care Act should be overhauled, rewritten, replaced, whatever, but do away with it. However, it should not be an excuse to delay action on nursing home staffing and the HCP, the home care packages waiting list. And as I said, it is a concern that that will happen, particularly for staffing in nursing homes, not so much for the home care packages waiting list, because there is another recommendation which we talked about, which is the entitlement to aged care, and a waiting list is incompatible with entitlement. So the new aged care is supposed to come in operation by the 1st of July 2023. That means that the waiting list will have to be done away with, and that is the recommendation, as we shall see in a minute, that the commissioners have put in place. The government would be breaking this new Aged Care Act coming into effect on the 1st of July 2023 if it continued to have 100,000 people on the waiting list for home care packages. So what exactly is being proposed? For the home care packages program, the commissioners recommend that it should be cleared by the 31st of December 2021. Today is the 8th of March, so the government has less than 10 months to do this. It's a very ambitious recommendation, and probably one that the government simply, even if it adopts it, can't really keep the faith with. It can do all it wants, but 100,000 packages rolling it out is a very, very difficult thing to do. But the Commission has also recommended that between the 1st of January 2022 and the 1st of July 2024, the government must keep the list clear. So effectively, what the Commission has recommended is that the home care packages waiting list should be cleared by the 30th of June 2023, when the new Aged Care Act starts. The date of the 1st of July 2024 is there because the commissioners have also recommended that the various aged care systems be integrated from the 1st of July 2024. So residential aged care, the home care packages program, and the entry-level home care program that used to be run by the states and territories, and it's now called the Commonwealth Home Support Program, should all be integrated into one big program, which sounds simple and sounds as though it makes sense. It's not that simple. But on the upside, 100,000 packages to clear, we do point out that there is still an unemployment rate of 6%, and many of people on the unemployment benefits used to work in hospitality, which obviously is not the same as aged care, but it does, to succeed as hospitality staff, you do need to have a people-friendly personality, and people-friendliness has been lacking in aged care, let's face it. Now to nursing homes and staffing in nursing homes. It's been known for at least, you can't really claim that you didn't know about staffing shortages in nursing homes after the October 2019 interim report by the Royal Commission that spelt it out, that nursing homes are understaffed, chronically understaffed, and not a little bit understaffed. They are understaffed a lot. Now, the commissioners have made good recommendations, but they won't start being implemented according to the recommendation from the 1st of July 2022. So that is that's still 16 months away when they would start. And at that point, the commissioners want the average resident to receive 200 minutes of care per day, 40 of which would be by a registered nurse. Now, this is for the average resident, so not all residents will get 40 minutes from a registered nurse, but it would be a huge improvement on what is happening now. The recommendation is also for at least one registered nurse to be on site for 16 hours a day. So not 24 hours, 16 hours. And this is all to happen starting from the 1st of July 2022 and to be achieved by the 30th of June 2024. So we're starting in 16 months implementing this and finishing 2 years later. And in CPSA's view, that is simply that's taking too long. That is prolonging a known problem, a problem that we've known about for a long time, even longer. After the 30th of June, the average care time per resident, average resident goes up to 15 minutes, 44 of those to be by a registered nurse, and finally, a registered nurse must be on site 24 hours a day. The mind boggles because this is such an urgent problem. This is a problem that is killing so many nursing home residents through neglect and sometimes through abuse. It's really inexcusable to take such a long time to implement that. Granted, the job is a difficult one, but there can be no excuse. If this was about kids, the time frames would be 6 months from now, or it would already have happened after the interim report Neglect was published in October 2019. Now to staffing ratios. There have been a few questions about staffing ratios in the lead up to this webinar. Let me just outline what the Commission has in mind. And I will do that in some detail because work has already started on getting a system together to implement these staffing ratios. The Commission has recommended all these staffing requirements that I just talked about, 200 minutes and the registered nurse's presence, to be linked, I'm quoting here, linked to the case mix adjusted activity-based funding model for resi care, for residential aged care. And that is likely to sound like gobbledygook to most people. So I'll explain what it is. You have a system that assesses residents, nursing home residents, and makes an assessment of the time required to meet their needs. Now you do that for every resident in a nursing home, and then when you've done that, you add up all the time requirements per resident, and there you have the total staff time requirement for the whole nursing home. And that's when you can tell, I need so many personal care workers, I need so many enrolled nurses, I need so many registered nurses, and I need so many ancillary staff. So it's not something that spells out, we have 4 residents, we therefore have 1 registered nurse, 1 enrolled nurse, and 2 personal care workers. It doesn't work like that. It's very flexible as to the actual occupancy and of a nursing home and the needs of nursing home residents. The important thing in that is that the assessment under that system would no longer be done by the provider as it is done currently, and which has led first to providers taking very grossly advantage of the subsidies and feeding their bottom lines, to very scant funding at the moment, underfunding, which causes even providers of goodwill to have to cut corners on staffing. But you can also see that the case mix adjusted activity-based funding is not really compatible with the recommendations for 200 minutes per staff, leading up to 215 minutes per resident, I should say, because of two different systems. And what the commissioners have said is that the case mix adjusted activity-based funding should at least meet 200 at first and 215 minutes per resident. So the commissioners seem to be not totally convinced that the case mix adjusted activity-based funding will produce the desired results. So there's a little bit of insurance, you could say. Another take on it is that you are going to operate 2 systems that are going to clash, and where the case mix adjusted activity-based funding maybe comes out at 300 minutes, it renders the commissioners' recommendations on 200 and 250 minutes totally useless. So I hope that makes sense. The staffing, the staff to residents ratio, the way that's proposed to be resolved, it's probably not what a lot of people think it should be, but the CPSA is cautiously optimistic about the case mix adjusted activity-based funding model. Okay, moving on from staffing, the standard of care. What is the Royal Commission saying about improving the standard of care? A lot of providers will tell you that if you give them more money, that the standard of care will automatically go up, but it's just providers that are very confident about that. The rest of people who watch the industry are not so confident. The new Aged Care Act is to embed high quality care. Now that by itself is a very high level requirement and a meaningless term. So it must be backed up by things, and it's backed up by the staffing ratios and also staff qualifications about which the Commission has made recommendations. The Commission has also put in place, very importantly, what is called a framework for how the system deals with dementia cases. A lot of the time, there is no special attention to people who receive care who have dementia, and they might start getting care through entry level, which is the Commonwealth the Commonwealth Home Support program, and progress through the system without really system acknowledging that they have dementia and that special care is required. Commission has said that needs to change, and there needs to be a standard for that. As I mentioned earlier, the home care program will be combined at some point with the entry-level temporary care category, which is offered by the Commonwealth Home Support Program. Now, that has always been the plan. The Department of Health has always wanted to integrate the Commonwealth Health Support Program with the Home Care Packages Program. But it never got around to doing that, also because the Home Care Program had its own difficulties and simply wasn't ready to absorb the Commonwealth Health Support Program. In CPSA's view, it would be much, much better to merge the home care program with the Commonwealth Home Support Program, so the other way around, because the Commonwealth Home Support Program is working quite well, and it serves the most people in the aged care system. So the Commonwealth Home Support Program, which operates on block funding, not personal funding, is simply doing better than the almost ideologically conceived home care support. The home care packages program. The standout recommendation in upping the standard of care is the new statutory duty that the Aged Care Commission has recommended. So there would be a non-delegable, and I'll come to that in a minute, why that is so important, statutory duty to provide high quality and safe care, and that comes with sanctions if that statutory duty is breached. As I said, it's non-delegable, which means that it's basically saying to aged care providers, if you want to subcontract any care or nursing care, personal care or nursing care to a third party, to another company who may or may not be an approved provider, it doesn't mean that that contractor becomes responsible for what happens. If anything goes wrong, it is still the provider who is responsible. And I just point to two examples. Most people would remember the Earl Havens scandal on the Queensland Gold Coast, in the hinterland, where Earl Haven had contracted out care provision in its nursing home to a third party, and that ended up in the third party walking away from the nursing home, leaving residents in the lurch. And Earl Haven's defence at the time was that it had a contractor which had breached its contract. With a statutory duty, non-delegable statutory duty, that scandal could still have happened, but it would have been squarely Earl Haven's fault, and it would have felt financial penalties as a result. The other example I mentioned is providers of home care packages, which are marketing their services as people being able to recruit their own staff. And the arrangement there is that you recruit your own staff, but you still have a home care provider which simply pays the staff, and your home care provider has no further involvement. So if the person you recruit turns out to be not suitable and does the wrong thing, your home care provider, home care package provider, claims it's not responsible and can just walk away. And you simply have no recourse. Under a non-delegable statutory duty of care, that arrangement is still possible, but the approved home care package provider would be a fool to let you engage in any of that sort of arrangement. Also, in aged care standards, both commissioners agree that the standard setting has been below par, and it wants an independent agency to set standards in future. And that agency would be the current agency that independently sets care standards for hospitals. And that, of course, is a very good idea. At a practical level, there might be problems, but the independent standard setting is very important. Also, the Commission has recommended a star rating system of services and providers to improve on what is currently provided through My Aged Care, which basically tells you whether a provider has passed assessments or audits, and then gives you lower grades for if they have failed it. In other words, it doesn't tell you how good the provider is, just whether it meets the standard, not how well it meets the standard, and if it doesn't meet the standard, it goes into great detail about how bad it all is. And that's pretty useless, because obviously you're not going to a substandard provider. You go to a provider that meets all standards, and then you want to know how good they are. And that is what the Royal Commission also wants to see happen. As I mentioned, the commissioners want the aged care system to be integrated. They want to see the aged care complaint system to be overhauled, and that would be, I think, the fourth or fifth overhaul of the aged care complaint system since the first one was introduced. So obviously, the aged care complaint system is hugely difficult to set up and run. There would also, as part of that aged care complaint system, there would be an appeals process, which currently does not really exist. You can go to the Administrative Appeals Tribunal, but it can be a very expensive route. So the Inspector General of Aged Care is going to hear appeals against the resolution of disputes, and there is also a possibility, if the Royal Commission gets its way, for nursing home residents and home care recipients to sue that provider for compensation if and when things have gone wrong. Another recommendation that the Commission has made was relates to GPs going into nursing homes. The Commission wants accredited aged care general practices to basically visit nursing homes and take on people who receive home care. It's very unlikely that this will get up. It's very likely that the government will go for an increase in some of the Medicare subsidies that are available to make it more attractive for GPs to go into residential aged care. The need for an aged care general practice for home care recipients hasn't really been established, and certainly the GPs are not in favour of more bureaucracy and red tape that goes with running an aged care general practice. Another recommendation that is unlikely to get up relates to oral health in residential care and also for people in home care. The recommendation is for the government to to basically extend the current state and territory run public oral health schemes and fund a category for people in aged care, and that would extend to people who don't even receive an aged pension. It would go to people on Commonwealth Health's support card who are currently paying for themselves, and that would be tacked on to the public oral health schemes that the state and territories run, which are vastly under-resourced and have been reduced to basically tooth pulling schemes. Another one I want to pick out relates to psychotropic drugs. As everyone knows, it's a huge problem in nursing homes that people are doped up without any relationship with their medical condition. It's simply to keep them quiet. And the Commission is recommending that in future only geriatricians and psychiatrists can prescribe psychotropic drugs to keep people quiet, so that those drugs would not be prescribed unnecessarily. This recommendation, in CPSA's view, does not make sense at a practical level, but also at a policy level. In practical terms, how are you going to find geriatricians and psychiatrists to come out to nursing homes when you can't even get GPs at the moment? Also, you would have to do some sort of pre-diagnosis to call them out in the first place that people might need psychotropic drugs, and who's going to do that pre-diagnosis? That would probably be a GP. So at a practical level, it is, we have to say, nonsensical. At a policy level, overprescribing of psychotropic drugs is the result of understaffing. So to reduce that problem, you must get more staff into nursing homes. And as we've just covered, it's going to be very, very delayed. The increasing of staffing in nursing homes is going to be a very slow process. It's disappointing that the Royal Commission apparently did not get that psychotropic drugs overprescription is a result of understaffing, not of GPs doing the wrong thing. Now, lastly, I want to talk about the funding and financing of aged care. There were some diverging views on that as well, although the differences are minor. First of all, when we talk about aged care funding, that's when we talk about the system of subsidies, personal contributions. When we talk about aged care financing, it's about finding the money. Finding the money is going to be the big problem in the implementation of the Aged Care Commission, Royal Commission's recommendations. The strange thing is that the commissioners have essentially recommended the abolition, cancellation of care personal contributions. They have recommended that the daily cost of living contribution that everyone makes continues. They've also recommended that those who can afford it pay for their accommodation, either in the form of a daily payment or as a bond, or in the case of one commissioner wants to abolish the bonds as well. But no personal contributions towards care. And that is quite a recommendation, because currently in the last reported year, the aged care system was financed to the tune of $21 billion, and $1 billion came from personal contributions. Those were care contributions. So we're not talking about aged care bonds or aged care daily payments. We're not talking about other contributions. Simply personal contributions for care amounted to $1 billion, and the aged care commissioners have recommended for the government to give up that revenue and make up for it by instituting a 1% increase in the Medicare levy, which by various estimates would generate revenue of about $7 to $8 billion a year. It's very unlikely that the commissioner's ideas will be adopted by government, and in fact, the treasurer, who has a great say about these things, has already ruled out increasing Medicare to fund aged care. The question then becomes, where is the money going to come from? The current government is not inclined to raise taxes, institute levies. So how are they going to pay for the as yet uncosted changes to aged care, which are very much needed and which are going to cost a lot of money? That is the big question, and it's a question on which the government will be forced to offer a response in May on budget night. We haven't heard the federal opposition about how it would go about funding aged care Royal Commission's contributions. That is disappointing, because they have committed to implementing all the aged care Royal Commission's recommendations, and it's going to cost money, so they would need to respond to that as well. Otherwise, we're going to have a bipartisan approach to aged care, which is going to continue the underfunding and the corollary, the neglect of residential of aged care generally. We're going to keep understaffing in nursing homes, and we're going to keep waiting lists for home care packages. I don't know whether I really need to do it, but I'll just give a bit of a summary of what CPSA thinks about this final report, or the work of the Royal Commission now that it's finished. Basically, the best work of the Royal Commission was the production of its interim report, Neglect. It was a great discovery job. No one can dispute the need for staffing ratios now. Nobody can dispute that the home care packages list needs to be attacked. Unfortunately, in the final report, the Royal Commissioners have dropped the ball by offering various and varying recommendations, some of which have simply has not tackled in any serious way the financing of all the changes that are needed, and that has been a criticism by the Department of Health, and it's most likely the reason why aged care is not going to do all that well in years to come. In other words, a little bit more diplomatic, it could have been so much better. Now, I don't know, as I mentioned, we have had technical problems with this webinar, so I can't really see the questions that have been asked, but there is somebody sitting next to me out of shot who might help me with that. Could you come a bit closer and read them out, please? Sorry to be doing this with one screen. Yep.
So Colin Beaton asks, aged care packages are a good money earner for private providers. There are a lot of new providers setting up, especially here in the rural towns. Most of the package funds goes on admin fees.
Yeah, okay, so the implied question is what's going to be done about that? First of all, the Commission has recommended that that bills are going to be paid not in advance, as they still are. The providers just get given a monthly amount, and they withhold from that for the services that they deliver. That's going to be paid in arrears, so you only pay for the subsidies are only paid for services actually delivered, and it must also be acquitted. At the moment, there's no acquittal of home care package funding. That alone, I think, will reduce the admin component of what home care providers charge. At the same time, running a business does carry administration costs, so but it's very likely that that home care package providers are ripping off the home care packages program through admin costs. I think it perfectly explains why there are so many businesses wanting to go into providing home care packages. There can't be no other explanation.
And we have two more questions. The second being, the report focuses on the qualifications of and ratios of staffing. What was said about the qualifications, assets, and abilities of providers?
Interestingly, not much, but for home care providers, qualifying as an approved provider is going to be much harder, or continuing to qualify as an approved provider, because the Royal Commission has recommended that various components of care delivery are going to be they're going to be assessed for that, their capability, for example, for personal care, nursing care. So it's not going to be a matter of qualifying as a home care package provider without much skill at all, and just hoping for the best when you send people into houses. You actually have to prove that you are capable of delivering that sort of care. Whether that will work perfectly is not a question, and certainly whether it will work perfectly right from the start is questionable. Wait and see.
And the last question, Paul, from Colin, was who pays for continence pads? A Bupa staff member has told me in her aged care facility, clients get one pad per day, leaving clients in wet and soiled pads most of the day. She has since resigned.
Yes, that is a common complaint. Not enough continence pads. It's the provider that pays for that out of the care subsidies and out of the care personal contributions that residents pay. Yeah, the complaint that providers are cutting corners there, very common. Okay. I also remember a few questions that I received through email. One was about the overall model of care. There is a school of thought that wants a community-based model of aged care delivery. You see some of that in the Commonwealth home support program, which is probably the reason why that Commonwealth Home Support Program works so well, comparatively relatively well, and the other two programs, which are more based on providers making financial returns, don't work so well. Well, the short answer is there's been no move towards a community-based model. Commissioner Briggs has suggested, or has recommended, I should say, that a capital fund should be set up for providers who want to build smaller nursing homes and take the group home approach to residential aged care, which also exists in disability care. But that's about the extent of it. It's going to continue to be a market-based model with all sorts of measures to try and mitigate against the very severe, people-unfriendly consequences of using such systems. If that's all, if there's one more question.
One final question from John Orbell. The ACQ and SC has failed to protect. What is immediate action to rectify? What immediate processes have been implemented to protect our most vulnerable?
Okay, well, splitting up the question, immediate action, none. This is a final report with recommendations. They have to be adopted first. There is a recommendation that both commissioners agree on, which gives independence to either the Aged Care Commission or the Department of Health's current Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission. So it gives it independence, and that should improve things. But for the time being, we are going to have to make do with the current Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission, which is not independent at all, subject to ministerial direction. It's a commission, but it has only one commissioner, which is helped or assisted by an advisory council. Sorry, I have to rephrase it, an advisory board, which consists of various people, obviously, but 2 places on there are taken up by the CEOs of large aged care providers. So there is no independence. And for the time being, we are going to have to make do with the largely non-transparent, unaccountable way the Aged Care Safety and Quality Commission goes about its business. Okay, I think that wraps it up. We apologise for the technical glitches, which has made this into a monologue. I hope it's not been too boring. And we are signing off now. Thank you and goodbye.